Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL Podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly.
Well, welcome back to the DCL Podcast, your podcast to cruise a little smarter. I'm your host, Lake. I am flying solo for another episode, but this one is going to be exciting. We have a lot of really interesting and unique stuff to get into with this one. We're going to be taking it out of Port Canaveral onto the beautiful Disney treasure today. And to have that discussion, I would like to welcome our guest to the show, Abby. Abby, how are you today?
I'm great, Lake. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for filling out the form and agreeing to come on the show.
Yeah, I've been a huge fan of the show. I've learned so much listening to your guests and the prior podcasts that I wanted to pay forward all of the great information that's been given to me by past travelers.
I love it. And talking pre-show, we have some really unique stuff to talk about today, so I'm very excited. Why don't we go ahead and begin with a little bit of you and your family's Disney or cruising background?
Yeah, I've been a Disney fan for most of my life and have visited the Disney parks dozens of times. My husband and I both have cruise experience from our childhood. He actually sailed on the Disney Magic during the early years of Disney Cruise Line. My family sailed Norwegian. When we got married in 2024, we honeymooned on a 7-night Southern Caribbean sailing on the Disney Magic out of San Juan. We loved the honeymoon cruise so much that we decided to book a placeholder before we left the ship. That placeholder ultimately turned into this Disney treasure voyage. So it was a trip that we'd been planning and looking forward to for quite a while. This recent sailing especially meant a lot because it was our first cruise with our daughter, who was 8 months old at the time that we sailed. It gave us a completely new perspective on both Disney cruising and family travel.
I love it. Were there any additional resources that you found beneficial for trying to figure out navigating cruising with an 8-month-old, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely joined the Facebook group to kind of get a sense as to the other events and things that were happening, other people that were traveling with children and questions they were asking, listening to the podcast. I also bought the book, and I believe the author has been on the podcast before, or one of the co-authors, The Unofficial Guide to Disney Cruise Line. And I have the 2024 edition, so it was the first edition that included the Disney Treasure. I've read that cover to cover. In addition to Shannon Ford, who's been on the podcast in the past, she has a very helpful page that talks a lot about traveling with family. And is it Lindsay who works for Disney Cruise Line now? I also follow her on Instagram, and she always has tips as well about traveling with children.
Very well connected with all of the friends of the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we jump into it, was there anything that you had pre-booked that you were particularly excited for?
On the pre-booking, I started by booking the maximum amount of nursery time ahead of the sailing, which was 18 hours. Mostly I booked 2 to 3 hour blocks during the sea days, and then about 2.5 hours each night for dinner because we were in the late dining, and I was concerned my daughter goes to bed usually at 7:30 Central Time. So we were going to be starting dinner at the time that she normally goes to sleep. We had booked the Royal Gathering. That was my first time with the Royal Gathering. And then we also booked 2 half-day excursions on each of our Virgin Island stops. So we had one for Tortola. We booked the Joost Van Dyke Beach transfer. And then at St. Thomas, we booked the St. John's on Your Own tour. We actually have never done the upgraded dining. I hear people talk about the experiences they have in upgraded dining a lot on the podcast. For us, the rotational restaurants already feel really full and very special. They're a great experience for us. So we've never felt like we were missing anything. We also like to keep things pretty flexible and relaxed on vacation. So the adults only pre-booking and kind of more formal nature, it just doesn't really match how we cruise at this point in our life. But I imagine at some point when we've been on all the ships more than once, we'll want to take advantage of that. But so that was the main thing that we had pre-booked, was just this couple of excursions, the Royal Gathering and then the nursery time.
Love it. Can't wait to dive into this here. But before you even get to the ship, you did have a little pre-stay at Walt Disney World. Where did you stay there? How did you get to Walt Disney World? And what was that like?
Yeah. So we flew from Iowa into MCO and took a private transfer with Orlando Magical Rides over to Disney Beach Club Resort. We spent a couple of days there before the cruise, which was a great way to ease into things. We went to Epcot during Flower and Garden Festival and spent one evening at the Magic Kingdom. With an 8-month-old, we really tried to keep things pretty relaxed. We would go to the park early in the day, do a couple of rides, and then head back to the resort to cool off by midday. And then we returned to the park about 5 p.m. once it started to get cooler. Even though it was early May, it was still getting well up into the 90s during the daytime. And that was just a lot of heat for our daughter. We used lightning lanes and rider switch so that we could kind of take turns on those big attractions and stay flexible with the baby. And we tried to keep our park time under 4 to 5 hours in a block just due to the heat. We did use the Baby Care Center at Epcot, which was incredibly helpful. The baby changing area alone is worth the walk. There's somebody there that's cleaning it like all day long. It felt very safe and very clean. Our daughter absolutely loved the Frozen Ever After ride and the Princess Breakfast in Norway. My husband and I really enjoyed the Guardians of the Galaxy and Cosmic Rewind, and then we spent time in the World Showcase. I was definitely a fan of the Frozen Viking coffee, and my husband is a lover of the black and tans at the UK Pavilion.
Love it. Well, real quick before we jump into this embarkation, you did mention pre-show that your daughter has some dietary needs, and that caused some navigating, I think is the best way to put it, throughout the entire process of the trip. Would you really quickly kind of talk through that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So my daughter uses a ready-to-use formula that's specific for her that we can't purchase easily. And so we ended up having to bring all of our formula for the entire 10 days that we were gone from home. And with DCL, they require that any ready-made formula, it has to be carried on with you at the time of your embarkation, similar to what they do with other liquids. And we ended up having basically like 2 crates of formula that had to be carried on with us, in addition to when we were traveling on the airplane, also when we were traveling onto the ship.
And you mentioned utilizing some additional resources for that air travel with that. Would you talk through that?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't remember where I got the tip. I want to give credit to Christy. I think it was her. She recommended registering with TSA Cares. So because we were going to be traveling with more than the maximum amount of liquid that's allowed, but it was medically necessary, more than 3 days in advance, you can register on the TSA website where they notify both your departure airport and the airport that you're going to be leaving to return home from with your traveler information. And then you just give a brief summary of what your specific accommodation is. In our situation, I let them know, the situation with her formula and that we were traveling with additional liquids. They met us at the security gate when they scanned our driver's licenses. One of the supervisors did, and then they go through and they hand check the bag. They do weigh everything. It takes about 5 minutes to go through that process, but we had absolutely no trouble. The TSA agents were fantastic with that, and it really was a big stress reliever to have that all go smoothly.
Did you need any additional accommodations with that, like once you got on the ship?
So the biggest thing was I ordered a $15 hand cart from Amazon, and we strapped the 2 crates of formula to one of those little hand carts, and that actually fit nicely in our return luggage going home. But that just gave us kind of another way that we could wheel it. It was too much that we couldn't actually put it under our stroller. So, and because we had to carry it with us, we essentially had to either put everything in a carry-on, which would have required a much larger carry-on than what we're allowed, or make it into somehow something that was easy to transport. So we ended up using just a hand cart from Amazon, and that really helped. The driver of the bus was fantastic. We did take the DCL transfer from the hotel, which was really helpful, and they kind of helped get our stuff organized for us because we were walking onto the ship with more than what's usual. So
lovely. Well, then you have gotten us to the port already, and it is time to embark on the Disney treasure. What was the general embarkation and port experience like?
As I mentioned, we took the DCL transfer. I know this is a question sometimes that I hear on the Facebook groups. We received an email from the DCL transfer about 2 days before our cruise departure. So on embarkation day, Bell Services came by at about 7:15 to pick up our bags that were going directly to the ship. We ended up going to the character breakfast at Cape May that morning, and then we met the group for the beach club transfer in the solarium. That was left on time at 9:30. It was about a 75-minute ride to the port. The only criticism that I have of the entire port experience is that there's really limited bathroom access. So we had a bathroom on the transfer bus, but someone had gotten sick. And so for most of the ride, the bathroom was occupied. When you arrive at the port, there really aren't any bathrooms available until after you've gone through security. And then the women's restroom line, of course, is always really long, and there's only a couple of stalls. There really wasn't a good place to change a baby. That was really the only friction point of an otherwise very smooth process. We were in boarding group number 5, and we were on board before noon. Once things got going, it was very much symptomatic. The bathrooms were really the only thing that was a sticking point in the whole thing.
Of course, this is where I need Christy, because she would be like, oh, well, if you walked here, there's a bathroom here. And then if you know your way around here, there would be a bathroom here. But sadly, I cannot give you that information.
Sorry, Christy, to the lay person. The bathroom access was not easily identified.
Well, it is time to embark on the Disney treasure. What was it like boarding her for the first time?
Oh my gosh. I felt a mix of emotion, excitement, gratitude. We had been planning this trip for over a year, and stepping onto the ship with our daughter just felt like a full circle moment, from our honeymoon on the Disney Magic to the first cruise as a family on the Treasure. The ship is beautiful, and walking into the Grand Hall, it's one of those moments where you just stop and you take in all the rich colors and the gold accents. People sometimes say that, babies and little kids may not remember the trips. And even if it's true, we're just going to remember her face. She lit up. Aladdin and Jasmine were there saying hello, and we're going to remember her excitement and the reactions. And that was what made the trip so special.
Amazing. Well, you get aboard. Where do you head first?
After boarding, our first stop was to go to the nursery open house to complete the registration and request some additional nursery hour adjustments that we wanted. We were able to secure every time slot that we wanted. That was a great start to the cruise. Since we'd eaten a pretty large breakfast at the Cape May Cafe, we weren't in any rush to find lunch, and it was our daughter's nap time. So we headed to Periscope Pub just for a comfortable place to relax. We had the entire place to ourselves. The atmosphere is just wonderfully quiet, and it has the 20,000 League Under the Sea theming. It's incredible. The beer was nice and cold. So we settled into those big cerulean blue velvet chairs and just started scrolling through the Navigator app. And we were watching the fish and the sharks overhead from the overhead display, mapping out kind of what our first day of adventure would look like. And while we did that, our daughter just had a peaceful hour-long nap in her stroller. It was cool. It was calm. It was just a perfect place for the three of us to unwind. I had one of the pina colada sours that they have there, and my husband had one of their Guinnesses, and we just had a great start. Our stateroom was ready about 1:30, and so after we relaxed at the Periscope Pub, we actually headed up to Deck 10 to check out our stateroom. And once we had dropped off our bags, we went up to Marceline Market, where we had sort of a late lunch. And the timing was perfect because it was at the end of the service, so the buffet was practically empty.
Love it. Well, let's circle back to that stateroom real quick. What stateroom did you book, and how did that work for you and your family?
We were on Deck 10, midship, near the aft elevators in a 4A category stateroom. The location worked out really well for us because it was just one deck up to Marceline Market in the family pool area. Having quick access to those spaces was incredibly convenient. One thing that I didn't fully appreciate about sailing before this trip was how long and narrow the hallways are, especially with a stroller when you're trying to navigate that. So even when your room looks pretty close on a deck plan, getting down those corridors multiple times per day with a stroller can feel more overwhelming than a person would expect. I would really recommend that if you're traveling with a stroller child, booking as close to the elevators as you possibly can. And if you're looking at a veranda, traveling with an infant or a child that sleeps in a pack and play, I would highly recommend upgrading to the family-sized veranda, the category 4, rather than the standard. The extra floor space made a huge difference for us. We were able to fit the Disney provided pack and play covered with our slumber pod, the portable blackout sleep out tent in the Murphy bed area against the vanity, like right next to the vanity. And so this meant we could just move around comfortably and access the veranda without disrupting our daughter's sleep. The flexibility allowed us just to use the room after her bedtime. It ended up being, I think, about a $500 upgrade for our sailing. And with a baby, it was absolutely worth it to us because it made the room just twice as functional.
Well, you get some lunch, you get settled in the room. Where else do you head on your embarkation day?
So we went to the muster drill, a mandatory muster drill, and then we ended up back in the stateroom, just relaxing and unpacking. Our bags were delivered shortly after the muster drill. We did forego the sail away party this time. We attended on our honeymoon cruise, but based on the amount of noise and activity for our sailing this time, it wasn't a fit with what we were hoping to accomplish with starting our trip. So we had kind of a quiet afternoon in the stateroom, and then we got ready for dinner. And my daughter went to the nursery the first night, and we went to Coco.
Well, let's go ahead and circle into dining here. I know we have a couple little changes and things to talk about within this, but overall, what were your thoughts on the restaurants? Any highlights or highlight meals for you?
We are never disappointed in dining on Disney Cruise Line. And I don't know if our expectations are just more in line with, what we typically do at home versus people who have a little wider foodie community and have more access to fancy cuisine on a regular basis. But for us, it always feels really special. And our dining team was fantastic. And the theming of the restaurants is so on point. This was our first time at 1923, our first time, obviously, at Coco being new to the Disney Treasure, and our first time at World of Marvel. And so having those experiences was just wonderful to get to experience those spaces and the stories that go along with it. The highlights for us in terms of food, I had asked my husband this question just to get his take, knowing that, we have different palate. So his very favorite food was actually the Pirate Night steak. And his second favorite was Donald's Cantina. He had a large bowl every day for lunch, and even a snack if it wasn't for lunch. And so that was by far his favorite. He also said that the Old Fashioned at 1923 was his favorite drink of the trip. For myself personally, I loved the whole first night menu at Coco. I had the butternut squash enchilada. I had the goat cheese tower appetizer, which was great. I really loved the amaretto sour at Scat Cat. That was probably my favorite drink of the trip, but we were able to get around and try all of the different bars and lounges. And then I think I previously mentioned the pina colada sour beer at the Periscope Pub, which for me, I like sour. And so that was also a really refreshing, great specialty drink that they had. Just as far as I know, they didn't have that beer on the Magic. So.
Love it. Where did you have your breakfasts in the morning?
We mostly went to Marceline Market. They have a really great spread of options, eggs, fruit, yogurt parfaits, all different types of things. We were easily able to find something to accommodate what we were looking for. We didn't order through room service, anything for breakfast. Our big room service buy is usually the all hands on deck cheese plate, and we get a couple of those every sailing. I like to have those when we're leaving the port and then sit out on the veranda and kind of watch us sail away and enjoy the cheese and crackers. And it's just a really unique view to get to sail out of some of those Caribbean ports. I think it's really fun.
Well, I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction, which is going to tie back to the dining. You had mentioned dropping your daughter off at the nursery for your dining. Pre-show, you had mentioned that plan had kind of changed through the sailing. Do you want to talk kind of through her nursery experience and how that affected that?
Yeah, absolutely. When we initially started the cruise, we thought that with the late dining time, it was going to be difficult for our daughter to stay up that late. And because of that, we decided to book the nursery thinking that we would be able to get her ready for bed and, take her in her sleep sack and that she would just fall asleep. The first night we received a message, she was upset and they were trying to settle her down. So I checked in with the nursery and they said that that was a courtesy message that they send just to let you know that they're trying to settle the child in case a person wants to come pick them up. But there was no requirement to come and get them, that they would contact you again if there was a persistent problem or if the child was becoming more upset despite what they were doing. We ended up the third night at Marvel, and that evening we decided to bring our daughter with us to the Marvel restaurant. We figured since it was already just a louder, more energetic dining environment, that she wouldn't be disruptive if she ended up getting fussy. And for us, that was a turning point. After that night, she joined us for dinner every night, and she just loved it. She stayed up well past her bedtime most nights, and we definitely paid for it for about a week after we got home. But she truly had the time of our life. Disney Cruise Line, they deliver such a great family experience, and our dining team had spoiled her in the best way. On this sailing, we were also seated with a great couple from Morgantown, West Virginia, Sky and Charles, and their 18-month-old daughter, who our daughter absolutely adored, just made mealtime so much fun for her. It ended up just being one of those really sweet, unexpected parts of cruising when you share dinners with table mates who are at similar stages in life. And it happened to be both my husband and Sky's birthday week, which made it feel even more festive and fun and special.
Oh, I love that. Were you able to utilize some of the other nursery times that you had still booked for her? And did that still work out?
Yes. So we ended up using the blocks for the days that we were at sea more than any other. And that made a huge difference for us in having time to explore the ship and to be able to go to the lounges and just different spaces where it's less ideal to have an infant. We also used the nurseries while we were on the Imagineering tour. We took the ship tour, and my husband is training for a marathon, and so he had several long workouts. I ended up taking one of the yoga classes that was offered at the fitness center. So we also utilized it to help support our workout. The longest block that she was there, though, was our day that we were at Castaway. And we ended up having her not get off the ship at Castaway just because we had ready access to get back on the ship if something happened. So that was the only time when we disembarked that we decided to have her stay on the ship.
Well, why don't we go ahead and turn it towards some of those spaces around the ship that you were able to take advantage of? What were some of the highlight activities and spaces that you found yourself hanging out in throughout the sailing?
On our first sea day, we wanted to take that morning and just go do some exploring. So when the lounges opened, they opened at about noon. We went to Scat Cat, Haunted Mansion, and the Skipper Society. That was really fun. Skipper Society has such great energy and a really unique menu. Scat Cat has the amazing theming, the Aristocats, theming. Haunted Mansion is so completely unlike any of the other lounges on any of the other ships that was so fun. And I had watched the Discovery Channel, The Building of the Disney Treasure, The Magic of the Disney Treasure, and they talked a ton about some of the features that were added to that and the Imagineering behind it as part of that show. And so watching the different art changes and understanding the backstory of how they got the fish in this, in the tank and those types of things, that made it really fun. So we ended up staying for about 45 minutes at the Haunted Mansion. My husband got the chilling challenge and he really enjoyed it. He thought it was a great drink. And of course it comes with a show. And that's the really fun thing about Disney is they make everything an experience. And the Haunted Mansion was probably the highlight of the bars for us for that reason. But we also were very partial to the Periscope Pub, especially having started there, and the uniqueness of that theming in space. We ended up in Sarabi a few times for trivia or pre-show, and then I think just once in the Triton Lounge, and it was kind of a very basic, just space where they have a small bar area. So for us, I think the highlight was the mansion.
Awesome. So many amazing spaces aboard that ship. Did you get to utilize any other entertainment, like any of the shows or anything while on board?
I went to Moana, and we had prioritized Moana knowing the uniqueness of that show. I am a huge theater person. My husband isn't as interested in theater. And for me, I really wanted to be able to enjoy Moana and not necessarily be fatigued from it being our third show that we were trying to go to with an 8-month-old. She made it about 2/3 of the way through the Moana show, and my husband did take her back to the stateroom, but I was able to stay and watch the end of the show. And it was absolutely phenomenal. It's won awards. It totally makes sense why it does. I thought it was by far the best show that I've ever seen in person that was not, on Broadway. And it's a Broadway caliber show. It was amazing and such a great retelling. And again, they did talk about that on the documentary a little bit too. So a little bit there was some preview into what to expect with it, but it just completely blew that out of the water. It was fantastic.
Awesome. You had also mentioned that you were able to do the Imagineering tour. What was that like?
Yeah, it was great. We had a very nice guide who was from Long Island, and we were in a group of probably 40 people. And the Imagineering tours are done with a headset or like an earpiece so that you can hear the person that's speaking, so it has adjustable volume. And then we walked through a lot of the common ship spaces, and she talked a lot about the art that was unique to the ship and the theming of the different cafes and the different bar areas. I thought that the whole thing just allowed us to have so much more appreciation for the story behind how so many of those spaces came to be, how much of the art was created by common artists that have done other works for Disney. And there's a beautiful painting of the Disney treasure sailing out to the fleet. I'm sure, do you know that I'm talking about, Lake? Yeah, I think it's between deck 4 and 5 in the aft. And it's the Disney treasure, sails to her family, I think is the name of it, or something like that. And I stopped and looked at that every time I walked by it all week. It's just such a beautiful picture, and the storytelling component of how they used the carpets and the art to bring in all of these different themes of adventure. I felt like it was the most amazing execution of that.
I love it. Any other highlights or activities from around the ship that we haven't already discussed?
So the Royal Gathering was the one other thing that we had really kind of prioritized doing. On the second sea day, my husband was going to go do a longer workout, and my plan had been to take our daughter to the Royal Gathering. I would really not recommend doing that solo. It really is a two-adult experience. Between the waiting and the managing of a baby and moving back and forth to the characters, it ends up taking about 45 minutes to an hour. And the Disney PhotoPass photographers, they're excellent and they make everything really smooth once you get to each meet and greet. But trying to manage all of that just with one parent, if you've got a small child or multiple child, it's definitely a two-adult job to make it easy. And the princess experience was fantastic. They're so personable, and the costuming is amazing. We had a wonderful experience with the Royal Gathering, but it was a little challenging to try to juggle everything with just me.
Gotcha. Something else I wanted to touch on is you had actually mentioned utilizing some of the fitness centers and some of the classes, I believe.
Yeah, so the class schedule opens up once the navigator is synced to the port Wi-Fi. So you can go in from the port, or for me, I was sitting in the Periscope hub, and it loads all the fitness classes that are available. So I did one of the slow flow yoga classes, which was great. And my husband did mostly the machines and used the general fitness center. And he did say that there was access to a barbell, but he didn't end up using the barbell there. I guess there was always kind of a line for that. I think he did use a couple of the other machines though. And it's a really nice space. It was in the forward of deck 5. With the promenade sort of being divided, we didn't use the promenade as much this time as we used on the Disney Magic, just because it's a little fragmented. And so those long walks around the ship are a little different to navigate on the split deck. So we use the fitness center more.
Yeah, definitely hard to get outside for the longer workout when you got to go up and down stairs to go around your track. Any other thoughts on the Disney Treasure before we disembark and talk about some of these amazing ports?
So this was the bigger class of ship, and I was really surprised, very pleasantly surprised how comfortable it was for being so much larger of a ship than the Disney Magic. It was exciting to see the differences and the updates that have come from, 20 years of ship making now, 25 years of ship making. So that was neat. But that was the main thing to us. I was worried about how big it would feel. And I still found that the spaces were very comfortable.
Love it. Wow. You've got some amazing ports here in Eastern Caribbean, and we've got stops in Tortola, St. Thomas, and of course, Castaway. Let's go ahead and let's jump into it. Your first port stop, Tortola. You had already mentioned pre-booking some excursions. Would you go ahead and just tell us what that excursion was again and how it was?
Yeah, so for Tortola, we had pre-booked Yost Van Dyke Beach Transfer. It's TT14. It was $99 per adult and $79 per child for our sailing. We chose the half-day excursion. We ended up with a really nice routine on port days. So my husband could go fit a run in before we left the ship, and we usually had like a relaxed breakfast. It made our mornings feel unhurried, which is a really nice thing to kind of keep us fresh and from getting burnout. So we took the later departure time for both of our excursions. So the half day to Yost Van Dyke was a boat ride and then an open air taxi over to White Bay Beach. Yost Van Dyke is just laid back Caribbean charm. It's got the beautiful white sand beaches, incredibly clear water, and it's very relaxed and feels very uncrowded. It felt definitely like more of a hidden island versus a typical tourist type of destination. I got the tip for Yost Van Dyke from my mom, who winters some in the Virgin Islands. We had a fantastic beach day. So there was a really nice variety of food and drink options that were available nearby, including the Soggy Dollar Bar, which is notoriously famous, in the area. And then there was plenty of natural shade from the palm trees and several like open picnic tables. They did not offer beach umbrellas to be rented for the day, so you just kind of had to find those shaded areas. We found it really easy to navigate, and with an infant, that made it really enjoyable for us. We would 100% do this one again. It isn't stroller friendly, and there aren't any dedicated places to like change a diaper or do any of those things. We really enjoyed it, though. That's just kind of some practical considerations if you're traveling with young children. It ended up being about 4 hours total, and about a third of that time we spent in transit. So we still had a couple hours to relax on the beach and swim, take in the scenery. Disney does offer a longer version of that excursion if you wanted more beach time, but for us, that was just the perfect amount.
I love it. Any other notes or highlights from that excursion or Tortola?
No, I did get off the ship at Tortola before we left on our excursion, just because the Tortola cruise port is right there. And so you can just walk directly to the shops. It's a short walk from the ship. I restocked my husband on Red Bulls and just kind of got the vibe of the port. And so for people who are looking to like, could you just hop off the ship quickly? Absolutely. The cruise port right there probably has about 15 or 20 shops. And then there's a very nice photo opportunity of the BVI letters with the Disney treasure behind it. And when I was off the ship, there was a wonderful lady from their Chamber of Commerce there that was actually taking photos for people. So the Tortola cruise port is very user-friendly and easy to access. It's also a very short walk to this excursion from that port.
Awesome. Another great call out. Well, let's go ahead and move into your St. Thomas Day. What did you get up to here?
So the name of our excursion at St. Thomas was the St. John's on Your Own, and it was ST59, $50 per adult and $35 per child. We chose the half-day trip again, thinking that hours-wise that would make the most sense. It included a narrated boat ride from St. Thomas over to St. John, and then we'd have a couple hours to be able to explore. We thought that that would be nice and would give us some flexibility. We could shop, get a bite to eat, walk around. Of the two excursions we did, this is the one my husband would not book again. This excursion itself actually wasn't bad, but it wasn't exactly as it had been advertised. So one thing that surprised us was how much walking was involved with getting to the ferry. It's probably close to a mile walk from the ship, and that wasn't a problem for us, but definitely guests that have limited mobility would want to be aware of that. We ended up bringing our stroller, so our daughter was riding in the stroller, but that turned out to actually be a really big mistake. So once we'd arrived at Cruise Bay, we walked over to Mongoose Junction, and it's a beautiful shopping and dining area, really unique. But between all the uneven surfaces, stairs, and kind of the choppy layout, it was probably the least stroller-friendly place that we went on the entire trip. We made it work, but it wasn't easy. My husband ended up carrying our stroller most of the time just because there really weren't any good places to park that. The highlight for us, though, was definitely lunch and drinks. We went to the St. John's Brewery and we browsed some of the local shops. We enjoyed that part of the day just a tremendous amount. On the return trip, though, the ride was a lot rougher than it was on the ride over. One of the beach excursion vehicles had broken down, and that delayed our departure. It felt like the captain was probably trying to make up some time on the way back because they had another excursion that was set to go out later that day. So the boat was moving fast through some choppy water. And my husband spent most of the ride convinced we weren't coming back in one piece. They did drop us off right next to the cruise ship, so it was nice to be dropped off. Again, I think that was more related to the timing, just because they were running late and they needed to pick up the other passengers who were at the Carnival ship that had docked a few hours after ours. But in the end, we really liked seeing St. John. But if we were going to do it again with the baby, we would do a different excursion, or we would make different transportation plans.
Awesome. Definitely an interesting day there.
Yeah, the water is a little bit rougher, but just the differences in the speed and the way the boat was handling on the way back. We're not people to easily get motion sick, but there were multiple people on the boat that were sick. So,
Well, we have one more day to discuss Disney's Castaway. What did you get up to here?
on Castaway Cay, Castaway Key, we we checked our daughter into the nursery, and my husband and I wanted to run the 5K together. We saw a few characters and had planned to spend some time on the island. There was an unusual delay that morning. I guess a shark had been swimming in the swimming area. They have great like netting systems and all of that, but they're very aware of what's happening with the wildlife. And so they had closed the swimming areas that morning. They ended up reopening at about 11 or 11:30. Because of the late start, a lot of the guests had stayed on the island longer than they otherwise would have, though. So we ended up heading back to the ship after our run, and it was super quiet, and we enjoyed the ship, and we actually used that time to start packing a little bit, and that made the last night of the cruise better for us. So we also actually had an early arrival at Castaway because there was a medical emergency on board, and so they had to do a helivac, and so we ended up docking about an hour before we had been originally planned to. This was my first time. My husband had been once before, but of course he was a teenager. So
Well, then, talking about that private island, did that kind of like meet your expectations, or what were your thoughts there?
I thought it was great. Yeah, I was really impressed by how clean everything was. Excellent access to food. The 5K route is hot and mostly asphalt. And a little bit, there's not a lot of site access where you can see because a lot of that route, you're kind of going between tall grassy areas, right? So you don't have great sight lines into, the beach. We did not stop at the lookout. I wish that we would have. We didn't realize where that entrance was. And so we didn't end up doing that this time. But it was a really fun morning that we got to explore the island. I would have probably gotten in the water. We had kind of planned to maybe stay out and swim a little bit. But with the water being closed, we just packed it up and went back to the ship. It did feel like Disney really went out of their way to bring out the additional characters to compensate for that not being open, though, because there were just characters absolutely everywhere. So, and maybe that's the typical for Castaway, but on our way back to the ship, we probably walked by 12 characters.
I will have some additional questions after disembarkation, but was there any other highlights from this sailing or anything else you wanted to share that we haven't discussed already?
I think you always ask about cast members. So for us, our stateroom attendant, Huda, and Ika was our dining room head server, or main server, not the head server, I guess, main server. And then we loved Fur at Scat Cat, who incidentally made a wonderful amaretto sour. We also really just had so much appreciation for the nannies at the It's a Small World nursery. So Disney, of course, in keeping on theming, has all British and Welsh nannies to embrace the Mary Poppins vibe. And they're fantastic group of people. Alice rocked our daughter for like 2 hours one night in the nursery just to get her to go to sleep when we were at dinner one of those first 2 nights. And we just really appreciated them. The ability to access good quality childcare on a family trip is always one of the key things in enjoying some adult time and being able to, use those adult only spaces. That allowed us to go on the Aqua Mouse. It allowed us to go to the adult only pool area, and just that having them there and knowing that they would do such a fantastic job with our daughter just meant so much to us.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that you were able to get good utilization and really experience most of the ship for yourselves. And I also love when people come prepared for the cast interactions question, because we can never give enough compliments to the crew and cast that make the magic happen.
So true.
Well then, sadly though, that will bring us into your final morning aboard, disembarkation. What was that process like, and what was your plan for getting back home?
Yeah. So I think the key to disembarking a Disney cruise ship is always having another cruise booked. Because then it lessens the drop in your energy and makes it easier. So we did express walk off. We had a 1 p.m. flight home, and Disney had kind of suggested that if your flight was 12:30 or before, you might just consider doing express walk off. We didn't want to take that chance, not knowing what the security situation would be at MCO. And so we did the express walk off. There was a pretty good line. We got in line at 7:15. And we were all the way back past the Skipper Society. So we were off the ship and on one of the first buses to MCO. We went through MCO security in like less than 15 minutes. It was just easy. We used the TSA Cares, and then we were ready to go home. It worked out really, really well. And, for us, using the Disney Cruise Lines transfer back to MCO just made it that much easier for us, knowing that, Disney would be able to get us to that destination and not having to stress with ride share or any of that. I will say that the Orlando Magical Rides was an excellent alternative for an airport transfer, and we really liked that service. I will definitely use them again, but having the DCL directly to MCO was definitely worth the money.
Amazing. And what an amazing sailing. I've got a couple more questions for you. First off, was there anything that you missed out on the Treasure that would be a must-do for next time?
I would always love to see the other shows that Disney has to offer. Seize the Adventure, I heard many people absolutely loved. We didn't do the Sail Away party. We did not do the Pirate party. We did the Color Spin dance party. And our daughter loved that. We had hearing protection for her and just all of the colors. She enjoyed that so much. I think that at whatever age your kids or family, you adjust accordingly to what you can do. And for us, we only had so much of that show energy. And so the Color Spin was perfect for her. And I would have loved that she would have made it through Moana, but it just wasn't meant to be this time. But definitely the shows, I think, would be the biggest thing that I would love to be able to do more of. I also didn't get a chance to have a drink at the Rose. We did walk through there, but the time of day that we had our childcare, it wasn't perfect for, getting a drink, but it was just bougie, and the views were amazing, and they had such a great champagne and scotch collection, and the vibe in there was fantastic.
Awesome. Do you have any additional tips for bringing an infant on board Disney Cruise Line?
Go for it. It is scary to sail with a baby. It's 100% scary. And I questioned our sanity in doing it more than one time. She loved it. I think that the biggest thing that benefited us was keeping things flexible. Over planning a vacation is something that is easy to do, especially when you're so excited about all of the things that you're going to be doing and all of the experiences you're going to have. But the most magical things that happened for us were completely unplanned. The first night of the sailing, we ran into Captain Mickey by the elevators and we got our family picture. My daughter loved Moana, and Moana found her 3 times on our sailing just without us having to wait in line. So the really magical moments that Disney creates, so many of those you can't plan for, or you don't even know that that's something that you could want. So just keeping things as simple as you can and not being afraid to encounter the unknown. Disney has been taking care of families for so long. They set things up for success for people. So if you are thinking about it, it is definitely worth that leap out there to try something new as a family. And the experience that you'll have traveling with your children is just some of the best memories that you get to have, regardless of how old they are.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. You actually just mentioned a couple times discussing taking photos. Did you utilize the photo package for this sailing?
Oh, great question. So I did not buy a photo package, but I bought 2 photos. There was a picture of my daughter from the Royal Gathering with Tiana, and she was wearing her Tiana dress, and I wanted that to be our Christmas card. And so I bought that picture. And then I also bought the picture of us as a family from Marvel, and it ended up being about $20 per picture. So they don't list that on the website or in the app, but you can just buy the individual images, and they're about $20 a piece.
Awesome. Well then, my final question for you, Abby. What is next for you and your family?
I'm so glad you asked. So we are headed to Vancouver in August of 27, and we are going to try the Disney Wonder in Alaska.
What an amazing cruise that will be for sure. And
So
we
excited.
definitely hope after that sailing that you want to come back on and share that one as well.
Well, I have so much respect for you and Christy and all the hard work that you do. It's so fun to talk about Disney, and I always love to do so.
And we love it too. Just talking about cruising with a lot of great people. Well, Abby, thank you again so much for coming on and sharing you and your family's experience on the Disney Treasure.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Well, that is going to wrap up our show. As always, you can follow Christy at Pack Your Pixie Dust or utilize her travel services by clicking the Book with Christy link right down below. You can follow myself at MouseGen on Instagram and YouTube, and you can follow the podcast at DCL Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. But that is going to wrap up the show. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you next time on the DCL Podcast. Bye, guys. Well, that's going to wrap up the show. Once again, we want to thank Abby for coming on and sharing her family's adventure on the Disney Treasure. If you're enjoying the show, we'd greatly appreciate you leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We'd also like to thank our Patreons who help make this show happen each and every week for us. You too can help support the show by visiting us at patreon.com/DCL Podcast. Whether you're boarding a cruise, enjoying a trip to the parks, or adventuring outside of Disney, on behalf of myself, Christy, and Steve, we want to wish you smooth sailing and safe travels. And we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast.
The DCL Podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.